I was in chemotherapy when he transferred my money to his mistress, so I made him regret every penny. I was in the middle of round 3 of chemo when something just felt off. I grabbed my phone, opened our shared bank app, something I never really did, and boom, right there, 3 fat transfers. One of them? $346.20. My heart legit dropped into my stomach. Cold, numb. And the name next to the transfer? Tracy Monroe. Yeah, that Tracy. The so-called wellness coach Jeremy hired to help me get through treatment. The same woman who made fancy teas and whispered fake calmness while I was fighting for my damn life. At first, Jeremy acted like he cared, holding my hand at appointments, bringing me juice, saying all the right things like some Hallmark husband. But by the 6th chemo session, he bailed, said the cancer ward gave him bad vibes. Watching me like this was too much emotionally. Soon, he ghosted the whole experience, said he was going on a spiritual retreat to recharge, so he could support me better, of course. Right. More like he went off to lie beside his mistress, while she drained my soul and my bank account. What he didn't know, while he was off recharging and sipping green juice, I was building strength from a place he'd never be able to touch. And when he came back, all smiley and smug, he had no clue I was already planning his reckoning. The kind of revenge that doesn't shout. It slices deep. I'm Nancy Mitchell, and this is how I burned down a man's entire double life, without even raising my voice. I used to think I was tough, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for the moment your own body turns on you. Chemo hit me like a freight train. My skin felt like it was on fire. My hair came out in terrifying chunks. And still, I was the one apologizing. Sorry I'm weak. Sorry I'm crying. Sorry I need help. Jeremy swore he was in this with me, that it was just a rough patch, that we'd get through it together. But his eyes, they told the truth I didn't want to hear. At first, he tried, hugged me before chemo, cracked dumb jokes in the waiting room, told me I was the strongest woman he knew. But the moment things got ugly, the moment I started actually needing him, he started to fade. It started small. Sorry, running late. Stuck in traffic. Then, total silence. Excuses stacked on top of excuses. Bad energy. Too tired. Meetings. Then one day, nothing. No text. No call. No Jeremy. But his name was still listed under husband, mocking me like a sick joke. The day I decided to shave my head, I asked him to be there. I thought it would be this symbolic moment, something brave. He said, I don't think I can handle seeing you like that. So I told him it was fine. I smiled through the phone like it didn't gut me, and went alone. The woman who shaved my head cried harder than I did. I wrapped my head in a red scarf, the one Rose, my mum, gave me, and came home to an empty house. Jeremy wasn't there, said he needed to clear his mind. I laid down that night, scalp on fire, the pillow cold as hell, and silence thick enough to choke on. My doctor told me to stop working, said the stress wasn't helping my recovery. Jeremy jumped at the idea, said he'd handle everything. Bills, errands, meds. Just focus on getting better, he said, like some kind of savior. And I believed him, because when you're that sick, you cling to anything that feels like care. So I rested, slept more, let go of control. And he took over the joint account like it was his personal wallet. For a while, I really thought I was safe, that he had my back. Until I noticed it. He was glowing, smiling more, acting like he was free, like he was living a whole different life, one that didn't include me. He said he was going to breathwork classes. I wanted to be more emotionally available. Said he was learning how to support someone in pain. I didn't even question it. Honestly, it sounded noble. But the more healed Jeremy got, the less he was around. Chemo got longer. My tests are more brutal. And the lonelier I got, the more he vanished. Then one day he said he had the perfect solution. I hired someone, a holistic wellness coach. Her name's Tracy Monroe. She'll take care of you when I can't. And at first, I actually thought he was doing something decent. Tracy was gentle, soft-spoken, made that fancy ginger lemon tea, and talked like she'd read every spiritual healing blog on the internet. But something about her felt off. She knew too much. What meds I took, my test results, even my next appointments. And Jeremy? Couldn't shut up about her. Tracy says this. Ask Tracy. Tracy thinks that, like I was the one with cancer, but she was the one taking over my entire life. Then came the kicker. The two of them disappeared together. Said it was a 2-day retreat for breathwork and emotional detox. That's when my gut finally screamed loud enough to break through the fog. I started piecing it all together, and looking back, he didn't even bother to hide it. But I needed something solid, proof. So during one of my chemo sessions, while sitting there with a needle in my arm and no one beside me, I used the bank app to pay for a test. Jeremy usually handled all that, but something told me to look closer. After the payment went through, I checked the statements. 3 massive transfers. One of them? $346.72. Everything inside me froze. And right there, in that cold-ass clinic, I realized he didn't just cheat. He stole from me. He robbed me while I was fighting for my life. And no one even noticed as the tears welled up in my eyes. The nurses walked by like I was just another patient. But I wasn't. I was a woman with nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. Nancy sat frozen, unmoving. The phone slipped from her fingers and landed softly beside her, the screen still lit. Her world had become a blur of test results, needles, and fragile slivers of hope. His world? Spas, bank transfers, yoga retreats, and a clean, shiny slate for some fresh start that didn't include her. But what Jeremy didn't realize was that even inside that frail body, ravaged by chemo and exhaustion, something fierce had begun to stir. Nancy's soul was waking up, and when a woman rises from rock bottom, carrying both pain and vengeance in the same breath, there's no stopping her. At that moment, she made a vow. He would feel this, not just once, but over and over, tenfold, for every time he treated her like she didn't exist. For that, she would need something ruthless, sharp, a plan built not on rage but on ice-cold focus. Soon after, Jeremy stopped pretending entirely. He no longer hid the fact that he believed she was dying. He'd nap through the afternoons, disappear for hours under the excuse of needing space, and bring home expensive bottles of wine, like he was celebrating something. Nancy, meanwhile, lay in bed dizzy, weak, and too nauseous to move. And still he said it was him who needed to clear his mind. That's when it became terrifyingly clear. In his eyes, she had 3 months left at most. He had already buried her in his mind, already started living like a widower, while she was still clinging to life across the hall. And worse, he was spending like a man finally free, as if every dollar in her name, including the inheritance her mother had left her, was a jackpot he'd been waiting to collect. That money was all Nancy had left. Rose, her mother, had always told her, "This is your shield, sweetheart. Never rely on a man to protect what's yours." But when she got sick, she couldn't do it all. She didn't have the strength to manage finances or argue over paperwork. Jeremy offered to step in. He said it would help take the stress off. And Nancy, desperate for relief, agreed. She trusted him. She loved him. And she never imagined he would use that moment of weakness as his opportunity to bleed her dry. But now it all made sense. The joy in his face she hadn't seen in years. The constant absences. The reckless spending. While Nancy fought tooth and nail to stay alive, Jeremy had already cashed out emotionally and was using her money to fund his escape. She would never forget those nights. Alone, in the dark, listening to her own heartbeat slow down, wondering if it was the end. That's when she remembered Rose again, and the promise she made, standing beside her mother's casket. "I won't be weak. I won't let anyone erase me like they did to you." Nancy inhaled deeply. A chill crept down her spine, but it wasn't fear. It was rage, pure and steady. And for the first time since her diagnosis, she didn't just want to survive. She wanted to return stronger, to rise, and to make him pay for every single second he assumed she was already gone. Jeremy came back from that so-called spiritual retreat like nothing had happened. He walked through the door smiling, energized, like he'd just come back from a damn vacation. In his hand was a necklace, bright, awkward-looking beads strung together like something from a tourist trap. He said it was meant to align my energy, to help me heal. Told me I had attracted this illness into my life, and that I could fix it with positivity. He was so proud of that thought, so pleased with himself. Nancy smiled, quiet, steady, and when Jeremy went upstairs to shower, she moved. She still felt weak, her legs shaky, hands trembling, but she powered through it. She opened his laptop and began digging. Line by line, she traced the lies, every transaction, every transfer, every dollar that didn't belong to him, and then she found it. A name, an account, an address. None of it hers, but every bit of it paid for with money that was. She froze. Her skin went cold. Her eyes burned. But in that moment, one truth rang louder than the rest. If death was circling her, it was going to have to wait. Because before Nancy left this world, she was going to wreck his first. One transfer stood out. A $2,800 deposit, plus 2 months' rent paid up front. The account name, Tracy Monroe. The destination, an address Nancy didn't recognize. But the moment she saw it, her memory kicked in. Jeremy had a sloppy habit of dumping receipts into random folders. She opened one called Future Projects, thinking it was old work stuff. But there it was. A PDF labeled Lease, Unit 1702. The contract was in Tracy's name, but the payments came from his card. It was all there. A sleek apartment across town. Balcony. Lake view. Brand new everything. Funded by her mother's inheritance. Nancy's stomach turned as she stared at the screen. He didn't even have the guts to tell her out loud. He was already starting over, already building his next life, assuming she wouldn't be alive long enough to notice. The next day, Nancy asked her sister Helen to drive. She didn't explain, just said she needed to get out of the house. They pulled up to a quiet, modern building. Nancy stayed in the car across the street, watching. And sure enough, minutes later, Jeremy walked out. Wearing light, expensive clothes, laughing into his phone like he hadn't a care in the world. Behind him, Tracy, holding his hand. She was wearing one of Nancy's necklaces. Nancy didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't flinch. She just knew, with absolute, searing clarity, this would not be how her story ended. Not with silence, not with surrender. If they had erased her in her most fragile moment, she was going to return the favor, with precision, and the world was going to watch them fall. The next morning, Tracy arrived at the house like she owned the place. She brought a glass of fresh juice, a little flower tucked neatly in her hair, and wore that peaceful smile that made Nancy's stomach turn. "You need to keep your mind peaceful, Nancy," she said softly, almost like she was speaking to a child, as if she wasn't the woman sleeping with Nancy's husband, while Nancy battled cancer in silence. Nancy didn't flinch. She nodded, played along, pretended not to know, but every touch, every soft-spoken word, every sweet gesture that pretended to be compassion, it was a slap in disguise. Tracy made the bed as if it was hers. She stored Nancy's medication in the same cabinet that still held her mother's letters. She moved around the house with the comfort of someone rehearsing for a role. Not just a nurse, a replacement, and worst of all, it was happening with Nancy's silent permission. When Tracy left the house that day, saying she was going out to pick up some flowers, Nancy made her move. She grabbed the laptop and opened a new folder, labeled it simply, Evidence. One by one, she collected everything, receipts, bank statements, screenshots of emails Jeremy had carelessly left behind. She worked calmly, deliberately. She wasn't just sick anymore. She was preparing for war. They thought she would fade quietly. They were wrong. She was still here. And now, she was dangerous. The next step was calling Grant, the lawyer, who had helped her mother manage her inheritance. Nancy insisted on meeting in person, even though her body trembled with weakness. She walked into his office, placed the folder in front of him, and told him everything. Grant read through the evidence, his face growing more serious with every page. When he looked up, his voice was steady. "You've got a very strong case, Nancy. If we take this to court, Jeremy won't walk away from it." That was all she needed to hear. In the days that followed, Nancy kept up the performance. She let Jeremy kiss her forehead like he was still the devoted husband. She let Tracy brew her chamomile tea, rub ointment on her skin, and hum through the house like a woman who'd already won. But Nancy was done playing victim. Every day, her evidence folder grew. Every smile Tracy gave her, every smug look Jeremy threw around the house, it only added fuel to what Nancy was building. Tracy was good at pretending, but Nancy, she was better. And what came next would be devastating. It happened one night, so simple, so fast, it was almost surreal. Tracy had left her phone on the kitchen counter, unlocked, careless. Nancy moved slowly, pretending to search for her medication. Her fingers hovered over the screen for only a second before she swiped. The chat thread lit up instantly, Jeremy. And the first message? It stole the breath right from her lungs. "She's getting worse fast. Soon we'll have it all wrapped up." Nancy stood there in the dim kitchen light, reading messages about herself like she was already in the ground. Not a person, a problem, an obstacle they were waiting to get rid of. They were discussing money, the final transfer, the last steps before everything in Nancy's name became theirs. Jeremy's message read, "Next step is getting everything squared away with the lawyer." Tracy responded with a heart emoji. Nancy took a photo of the screen and emailed it to herself without a sound. Then she walked calmly back to the living room, sat on the couch, and waited. Tracy came in a few minutes later, still smiling, still playing nurse. She brought tea, tucked Nancy under a blanket. She wished her a peaceful night. Nancy thanked her, even managed a tiny smile. But something had shifted. The next morning, Nancy reached out to an old friend of her mother's. The woman worked in security systems and still owed the family a favor. Nancy kept it simple. She needed a discreet camera installed in the hallway between the kitchen and the bedroom. By nightfall, it was done, and Nancy had full access from her phone. It didn't take long before she became hooked on the footage. She lay in bed, headphones in, watching in silence. Jeremy and Tracy moved through the house like she was invisible. He'd pull Tracy close by the waist in the kitchen, whispering about the new place. Tracy rifled through Nancy's belongings like she already lived there. But now, it was all being recorded. 1 week later, Nancy hit gold. The camera caught them talking about the inheritance. Tracy urged Jeremy to move faster. He hesitated, said he needed to wait for the final medical report. Then Tracy, without missing a beat, asked, "What are you waiting for?" "For her to die naturally?" The silence that followed was the worst part. It was the silence of two people in agreement. Nancy saved the video and sent it straight to Grant, her lawyer, and for the first time in months, she slept. Her body was still fragile, but her mind sharpened like a blade. She knew it now. This revenge, it wasn't just justified. It was ready. She started playing sicker, acted more tired, more weak, coughed louder, spoke softer. Jeremy would ask, "Do you want Tracy to stay the night?" Nancy would smile sadly, "I'd rather be alone." They believed her, because they wanted to believe it. What they didn't know was that the fever was gone. The nausea had faded. Nancy was getting stronger, quietly, secretly. Every moan was fake. Every sigh, a performance. And Jeremy? He let his guard down. Tracy became cautious. She'd glance at Nancy from the side, like she sensed something was off. But she had no proof. Nancy did. Another clip from the hidden camera captured Jeremy on a call with the bank. He was asking about early liquidation of joint assets. His voice was flat, technical, cold, as if Nancy didn't exist anymore. That night, Jeremy knocked on her door, envelope in hand. He said it was just a standard document, nothing important. Nancy gave him a tired smile and said in a hushed voice, "Leave it on the dresser. I'll sign it tomorrow, if I'm still alive." Then she closed her eyes. But she wasn't resting. She was waiting. Once Jeremy was out the door, Nancy picked up the envelope with trembling hands. Her heart thudded against her ribs as she opened it. Inside was a formal request, one meant to transfer the only money still under her name, not the joint account, not the ones he had already drained. This was the last of it. He had told her he'd found an amazing new treatment overseas. A clinic in Toronto. Less aggressive therapies, better odds. He said he'd already contacted them, that they just needed a deposit right away, that if she wanted to live, she didn't have time to mess around with forms and approvals. But something didn't sit right, so she checked. The clinic didn't exist. The email was fake. The entire thing was a scam. Jeremy hadn't just underestimated her strength, he'd insulted her intelligence. He thought she'd be too sick to notice, too trusting, too weak. He planned to empty the last of her savings, leave her penniless, and make sure no one, not even her family, inherited a single cent. The next morning, Nancy looked him in the eyes and told him she didn't understand some of the terms. He wrapped his arms around her, kissed her forehead, and said he'd handle everything. Said she just needed to trust him. As if that word still meant anything. Later that afternoon, she went straight back to Grant's office. She laid the document on his desk and walked him through every word. His response was sharp. This man is trying to wipe you out completely. In that moment, Nancy felt something click. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising. Each morning, she woke up a little more sure of herself. Stronger. Sharper. The kind of certainty that comes when a woman has been silent for too long and finally decides to act. She made herself tea, sat a day down at her computer, and opened Grant's latest message. "It's all here, Nancy. We've got enough." The files were all there. The bank statements, the call recordings, the forged Canadian clinic paperwork, the attempt to move her private fund, the account under Tracy's name, and worst of all, the request to remove Nancy from her own life insurance. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a premeditated fraud. That night, Jeremy claimed he was going to the pharmacy to grab vitamins. But Nancy knew exactly where he was headed. That sleek lakeside apartment, the one with the fresh linens and the balcony view, the future he had built for himself, using her money. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, Nancy sprang into action. She called the bank, locked the accounts, froze the funds, triggered official investigations. Grant stayed on video call, walking her through every legal step. She followed them all to the letter. Then she picked up her phone and sent Tracy one short message. "I know everything." She left the phone powered off on the kitchen counter, so they couldn't trace her. Right after, she backed up all her evidence and emailed it to Grant and to herself in an encrypted folder. If anything happened to her, the truth would still find daylight. Before leaving the house, she changed clothes. No scarf, no sick face, no shell of a woman. She slipped on her mother's red blouse, a fitted pair of jeans, red lipstick. And when she looked in the mirror, for the first time in months, she didn't see fear. She saw herself, whole, alive. At exactly 2 p.m., she walked into the law office and handed over everything. The complaint was filed, the evidence was attached, and a formal request was made to freeze all assets in both his and her name. This wasn't just her plan anymore. Now, the law was part of it too. Now, it wasn't just personal. Now, it was legal. When Jeremy came home, he found the front door locked. New locks. No warning. And taped to the glass, a simple note in Nancy's handwriting. "You thought I was weak. Now you'll feel the weight of my strength." He didn't even make it inside before the world started unraveling. Within the hour, his phone exploded. First the bank, then the accountant, then the lawyer, well, their lawyer, until Nancy made it crystal clear she wasn't sharing counsel anymore. Nancy, meanwhile, was curled up on her sister Helen's couch, sipping tea and resting her hand over her still swollen belly, watching it all unfold on her tablet like a courtroom drama. The joint account, frozen. The complaint she filed, packed with evidence, had already been sent to the Financial Crimes Division. And within 2 days, every asset in Tracy's name, down to the last dirty dollar, was pulled into the investigation. The New Beginning apartment was no longer a sanctuary. It was now part of a court order. Tracy tried to act fast. She tried to withdraw, cover her tracks, and disappear. But she was too late. The paperwork was already in motion. Jeremy called 10 times. Then came the texts. First frantic, then angry, then desperate. "Nancy, what did you do?" "You're going to destroy everything out of spite." But he had it all backward. She didn't destroy anything. She simply stopped letting him get away with it. Tracy, on the other hand, vanished like smoke. She returned the car, changed her number, stepped down from a job title she never actually earned. Jeremy chased after her, found out she was already looking for her own lawyer. That's what panic does. It scatters the guilty. And those who plotted together, they always end up hiding alone. That night, Nancy locked the door behind her and finally slept. Not like a patient, but like a woman with a plan in full swing. When the subpoena landed, Jeremy tried everything: calls, emails, excuses. But by then, it was too late. No one was listening. But Nancy had already won. She just let him walk straight into his own collapse. Weeks later, she went back to the hospital. There were no tears, no shaking hands, no fear clouding her vision. Her test results? Stable, promising. The doctor looked at her, almost surprised. "You look stronger," he said. Nancy smiled, because she was. Her body still wore the scars, but her soul? It was standing taller than ever. She didn't mention the lawsuit, didn't talk about the subpoenas or frozen assets. She just kept showing up, taking her treatment, letting the healing do its work, inside and out. Because behind the quiet walk, the soft scarf, the polite nods, there was a woman at war, and that war had gone public. Jeremy had been formally summoned to testify. The case now had two fronts: civil, for robbing her blind; criminal, for fraud and embezzlement. When he got the subpoena, he spiraled again. More calls, voice notes, emails full of guilt and spin. It was a mistake. But Nancy didn't need to hear it. Not anymore. "I was confused," Tracy manipulated me. That's what Jeremy told the judge. Like that somehow erased what he'd done. But Nancy didn't flinch. This time, she had more than just rage. She had proof. And more importantly, she had time. The DA's office had everything. The audio recordings, the bank transfers, the forged contract, the fake Canadian clinic, the attempt to wipe out her private funds, and that document, the one Jeremy tried to get her to sign to steal what little she had left. At the preliminary hearing, Jeremy pulled out every excuse in the book, said he acted out of desperation, said Tracy seduced him, said he didn't know what he was doing. But the judge wasn't buying any of it. He looked Jeremy straight in the eyes and said, "You didn't seem that desperate when you were buying $900 French wine." Silence, that kind that chokes a courtroom. Right then, Nancy knew this wasn't going away quietly for him. For once, justice didn't blink. It saw everything. Later that day, her lawyer Grant called. "Just a matter of time," he said. "He's going to pay for all of it." Nancy hung up and sat there, breathing in a calm she hadn't felt in months. The next week, she walked into the salon. No scarf, no disguise. She asked them to trim the baby hairs that had begun growing back. And when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the woman who had broken down. She saw someone rebuilt. Not the same, better. She began walking again, cooking for herself, reclaiming the tiny joys of living. Every time an ugly memory tried to crawl back in, she whispered to herself, "He didn't kill me. He taught me how to live." Her mother, Rose, used to say, "The best kind of revenge is carried out with dignity," and Nancy finally understood what that meant. Watching Jeremy stand in court, exposed and humiliated, watching him lose everything without her lifting a single finger, that was it. She didn't scream. She didn't stoop. She survived. And she didn't just survive. She thrived. The judge didn't hold back when the sentence came down. 3 years in prison. No parole. Partial loss of civil rights. Full restitution of the stolen funds. Jeremy cried, begged, said prison would destroy him. But nobody in that room gave a damn anymore, because the woman he tried to erase? She was standing tall, head held high, staring straight at him. No tears, no fear. Tracy had disappeared after everything went public, but they found her. She was sentenced to 2 years. At Nancy's final chemo session, the nurses clapped for her. The tumor had shrunk. Jeremy now lives with his mother, the one who always said Nancy wasn't good enough. Now she calls him the family's disgrace. As for Nancy, she sleeps peacefully. Her name is clean. Her scans are clear. Little by little, she got it all back. Her strength, her peace, her identity. She even got a tattoo, just one letter, M, for Mitchell, her mother's name, her anchor. She walks in the park now, cooks without sadness, smiles without effort. And somewhere along the way, she realized, revenge wasn't about watching him suffer, it was about watching herself become whole. Without fear, without pain, and without him.